It's 7 o'clock, and this is the Dartmouth Conservation Commission's duly posted public meeting for July 9, 2024. We're conducting this meeting remotely this evening because on March 29 of 2023, Governor Healy signed a further extension for hybrid remote options for municipalities to conduct their meetings remotely if they wanted to, and that option was extended until March 31 of 2025. We have a raise your hand feature, so there can be interaction with those that are observing, and a wave your hand if the raise your hand doesn't work, and you'll be recognized. Would ask everyone who isn't speaking to mute themselves so that we don't get ambient background noise disrupting the presentation. We have with us this evening a quorum of 4 out of our 7 commissioners. That being said, there is one public hearing, the first one, on which one of our commissioners, Mr. Mallon, has to recuse himself, so we don't have a quorum for that particular public hearing. There's another public hearing which also needs to be continued. That's the second one, and that's because the planning board hasn't had their meeting to release the lots in question, and therefore we have that particular issue. I think we still have, I believe we still have the third, except other than the fact that it wasn't advertised or posted on time, Mark? I forgot which it was.
It was not advertised.
Not advertised on time because we just got the information from the collector's office too late to advertise, so that has to be continued as well, as it wasn't advertised. So we're not going to have any public hearings tonight. If somebody's here for a public hearing, I'm just alerting you to the fact. We'll read it, but they'll all have to be continued. So I don't want you to waste your time on waiting for it to say something. There won't be anything to say. That being said, we're going to the administrative, and the first is to approve the minutes of June 11, 2024. Of a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Second.
We have a seconded motion. Roll call vote. Richard. You're muted, Richard. We'll come back to you, Richard. So, Kyle.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Yes.
can you hear me now?
Yes, I can, Richard.
Yeah.
Yes or no?
Yes,
Yes, and I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously. The second is the approval of the field trip report of June 25, 2024. May I have a motion to that effect?
so moved.
Second.
The seconded motion. Roll call vote. Richard.
Yes,
Kyle.
Yes.
Matt.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously. Our third administrative item is to receive the minutes of June 25, 2024. We have a motion to that effect.
so moved.
Second.
Seconded motion. Roll call vote. Richard.
Yes,
Kyle.
Yes.
Matt.
Yes.
My vote is yes. That motion passes unanimously. We move on to our field trip reports. The first is a continued request for determination of applicability, RDA 24-6, for Manal Mogawar, for permission to construct various livestock enclosures and to compost manure within the 100-foot buffer zone of a bordering vegetated wetland. It's on land described as map 169, lot 180, otherwise known as 43 Macomber Avenue. Mark, what is staff's recommendation on this request?
Yeah, this has been kind of a long drawn out affair, but I think we're at a place where we can make a reasonable determination that's fair and equitable. This is a very small lot, smaller backyard area, currently houses, I think, 34 animals, way too many animals for the carrying capacity of the land. The applicant does agree and has agreed to reduce the number And I believe the numbers that I'm going to recommend to you are consistent with what they want to do. It certainly is consistent with proper animal husbandry for lots, and I utilize Jenna, our conservation officer, who is an animal control officer and is well versed in the carrying capacities of properties. So having said that, this work is also entirely in a buffer zone, and our real concern is waste into the down gradient wetland. So staff has mulled this over, and what we are doing is we are recommending a -3 determination here, but with conditions. And I'll read those conditions to you. The first being that all destabilized ground conditions shall be segregated from the down gradient jurisdictional wetland resources with properly installed and maintained staked and entrenched hay bales or wattles and silt fence. 2, housed animals on site shall be limited to 6 chickens, 2 ducks, and 2 small mammals. 3rd, all proposed animal housing, compost storage, and all animal enclosures shall be within the legal property lines and any required setbacks. In addition, the entire rear yard area shall be fenced in within the legal property lines to keep all birds and mammals on site. 4, and lastly, no runoff shall discharge off-site onto any adjacent properties or roadways, public or private.
Thank you, Mark. Does any commissioner have any questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to issue a -3 determination with the conditions outlined by Mr. Garrett, which includes sediment control, a limitation on the animals that can be on site to 6 chickens, 2 ducks, 2 small mammals, with all animal enclosures and structures within the lot line and compliant with zoning setbacks, that the entire area be fenced in, and that there be no surface water runoff to any off-site property or roadway.
So moved.
Second.
Give a seconded motion, roll call vote. Richard,
Yes.
Kyle,
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
My vote is a yes. That motion passes unanimously. Now, we did get information from the tax collector that the taxes are current. So unlike the last number 3 public hearing, this particular request for certificate of compliance did not require publication. So we are able to hear it tonight and make a decision tonight. So this is a request for certificate of compliance, DEP file 15-2416, RCC 24-21 from Timothy Major for permission to add an attached breezeway and garage to an existing home within bordering land subject to flooding and within the 100-foot buffer zone to an inland bank. It's on land described as map 179 lot 9. It's otherwise known as 740 Reed Road. Mark, what is staff's recommendation on this request?
Yes, this COC is for an expired notice of, an expired order of conditions in which the then owner did not complete all of the work proposed. Everything they did was in conformance with the order of conditions. There was one last piece that they did not include, and that was roof runoff infiltration. The order expired, so they cannot finish, the new owner cannot finish that work without an order of conditions. The taxes, from my understanding, where the previous owner did not fulfill the tax obligations, tax collector held this up until yesterday morning when I personally went up, having seen a report that payments had been made, and personally got this cleared at about 9:30 yesterday morning. And as the chairman said, we can hear the certificate of compliance case on this because there is no legal ad that needs to be published. We cannot hear the subsequent notice of intent, which was concurrently filed, since we could not post the legal ad until tax cleared that. And that was well beyond the deadline for legal ad for tonight. Having said all that, staff is recommending a complete certificate of compliance with the condition that this complete certificate of compliance is contingent upon a final order of conditions being issued on the pending case file number 152743 to be heard on July 23rd, 2024. So in essence, we have everything to have that hearing. My guess is, looking at the design, we will recommend approval at that time. It's consistent with what is needed to be done out there. So this is a complete certificate contingent on the issuance of that order in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Mark. Does any commissioner have any questions from staff? I don't see any, so I'll entertain a motion to issue a complete certificate of compliance, conditioned, as Mr. Garrett has outlined, on the issuance of an order of conditions.
Mike, you're muted.
My paper must have touched it. Conditioned, as Mr. Garrett had indicated, on the issuance of an order of conditions on case number 152743, which will be heard on Tuesday, July 23, 2024 at 7 p.m.
So moved.
Second.
With a seconded motion, roll call vote. Richard,
Yes.
Kyle,
Yes.
Matt.
Yes.
My vote is yes, that motion passes unanimously. So that concludes our field trip reports. We're moving on now to the public hearings. And as I stated at the outset, we're not going to be able to hear any of them. So I'm going to read them and have request for a motion to waive the reading, and then we'll have to vote to continue. So the first, and Richard, you're going to recuse yourself, so we can't do anything with that, really. I can read it, and then I'm going to have to not even take, I'm just going to have to read it and say it's continued because we have no choice. We don't have a quorum.
I would say it's administratively continued.
Right. So, I mean, there's not going to be any votes on that, but I'm going to read it. We have a continued public hearing, DEP file 15-2737, NOI 24-19. It's on the notice of intent for ecological restoration from Thomas Hardman to eradicate existing Phragmites and any other invasive species within a bordering vegetated wetland, the 100-foot buffer zone and land subject to coastal storm flowage. Applicable regs are 310 CMR 10.02, 10.04, and 10.55, and Section 2 of the Town of Dartmouth bylaws. The land is described as map 113, lots 30 and 30-1. It's 5 and 15 High Street. Because we do not have a quorum, we must administratively continue this matter until Tuesday, July 23, 2024 at 7 p.m. I want the record to note that Richard Mallon recused himself from this public hearing and was this matter, even though there was nothing that was actually brought before us. Number 2, public hearing, DEP file 15-2735, NOI 24-22. It's on the notice of intent from Sasha Rodriguez for the construction of a single-family home with paved driveway and associated grading in the 100-foot buffer zone to a bordering vegetated wetland. The applicable regs are 310 CMR 10.02 and 10.55, and Section 2 of the Town of Dartmouth bylaws. It's on land described as map 34, lot 2-2. It's on Bakerville Road, Vineyards, lot 5. I'll entertain a motion to waive the reading.
So moved.
A second on that motion?
Second.
You have a seconded motion, roll call vote. Richard,
Yes.
Kyle,
Yes.
Nat?
Yes.
My vote is yes, that motion passes unanimously. As was noted earlier and also on the agenda, the planning board has yet to release the lot. They will possibly or probably do so at their next meeting. So this motion, the motion I'm asking for is a motion to continue this until our Tuesday, July 23, 2024 meeting at 7 p.m., by which time the planning board should have voted to release the lots.
So moved. Second.
We have a seconded motion, roll call vote. Richard,
Yes.
Kyle,
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
My vote is yes as well. That motion passes unanimously. Our final public hearing is DEP file 15-2743. That's NOI 24-29 from Cynthia Kudo for permission to install a roof drain filtration system for the recently constructed garage and breezeway within bordering land subject to flooding and within the 100-foot buffer zone to an inland bank bordering on Lake Nokichoke. The applicable regs are 310 CMR 10.02, 10.55, and Section 2 of the Dartmouth bylaws. The land is described as map 179, lot 9. It's otherwise known as 740 Reed Road. I'll entertain a motion to waive the reading.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded motion, roll call vote. Richard,
Yes.
Kyle,
Yes.
Nat?
Yes.
My vote is yes, that motion passes unanimously. As previously discussed, we did not get word from the town tax collector in time to advertise this. So it must now be advertised. We must continue it until the next public hearing, which is Tuesday, July 23rd, 2024 at 7 p.m. Have a motion to that.
So moved.
Second.
We have a seconded motion, roll call vote. Richard,
Yes.
Kyle,
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
My vote is yes, that motion passes unanimously. We're now moving to the items for discussion, and the first is we have a $664 bill to MACC, and that's for our dues.
That's our annual dues, yes.
And I will entertain a motion to authorize payment of $664 to MACC for the annual dues.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded motion, roll call vote. Richard,
Yes.
Kyle,
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
And my vote is yes, that motion passes unanimously.
Mr. Chairman, if I could add, we did get a second bill, which came after I posted this, for $369.98 for office supplies to WB Mason. I'm asking for that to be authorized also out of our office supply budget.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to pay WB Mason the sum that Mark has just indicated for office supplies to be paid from our office supply budget.
So
So
moved.
moved. Second.
Seconded motion, roll call vote. Richard,
Yes.
Kyle,
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
My vote is yes, that motion passes unanimously. Mark, you might as well take the helm for the items for discussion.
Okay, real quickly, and certainly tonight is evidence of the need. Last week, prior to the holiday, a subcommittee, Mike, Kyle, and myself interviewed Megan Morrison for one of the vacancy positions on the commission. Megan, I sent copies of her resume. She's an architect. She understands design. She understands development. She also indicated a concern for conservation of lands. She seems to understand the balance between protection and use. And I don't want to speak for Mike or Kyle, but I think the three of us were very much in favor of recommending to this commission to vote to further her application to the select board with a recommendation to appoint.
I concur with Mark. I thought she would be a good candidate for a conservation commissioner.
As do I mean, with her technical expertise and just her willingness to serve the town. She seemed very professional, and I think she'll make a good commissioner.
So with that, I would ask for a vote, a motion that is to authorize Mark to issue a letter to the select board recommending the Megan Morrison be appointed by the select board as a conservation commissioner for the town of Dartmouth.
So moved.
Second.
Give a seconded motion, roll call vote. Richard,
Yes.
Kyle,
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
My vote is yes, that motion passes unanimously. You still have the helm, Mark.
Okay, the second item is, discussion of the draft wetland regulations. There are two items here that are of issue to me. First of all, I've incorporated every comment that I have received to date into the draft that I sent out. Nat, I think you said you might have some minor comments moving forward.
I thought I'd sent them to you. They weren't anything
I didn't get the
substantive.
comments. I got an email saying that we would discuss them. I haven't seen them.
Oh, strange.
I think you sent them from your work email, and I think they got quarantined because the network didn't recognize it, so.
All right, I'll dig it up. It wasn't anything heavy. It was more a couple of questions, but they weren't major. But I'll dig it up. I'll send it to you.
Okay,
I did see something you sent today about a definition of aesthetics.
well, I want to get into that a little bit. In the copy that I sent, on several pages, there was text in blue. And that text was questions that I had. Okay, for example, on page 1, Mike, I think it was a comment you made, under burden of proof, the credible evidence more likely than not. I didn't know what that meant. I had to do with credible.
Well, I think we need to, I wanted to just define what the burden of proof was so they know it's more likely than not. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt. Okay, so that there's no ambiguity as to what the level is that you must meet.
Okay, no ambiguity.
Because I think if it's a little bit ambiguous and we're interpreting it as more likely than not, some aggrieved
Okay,
may think that, hey, wait a minute, I can conceive of a scenario where this doesn't meet performance standards.
okay. All right, that's fine. Okay, I understand I didn't pick that up in your
I
comment.
understand that. When I was going through it, I was going through it for me, but
Yep.
to save time, I gave it to you
That's
as
fine.
well.
Okay, I'll look at that. The next comment I have is we have several definitions where we say as defined in the bylaw. I would just strike them. If they're defined in the bylaw, we don't need to say in the regulations that they're defined in the bylaw. They should already know that. So I'm asking you to strike those particular line items.
It makes it easier. I mean, I don't have a problem with that.
Anybody else?
I don't have a problem with that.
No, I'm fine with that.
I'm good.
Okay. The last item on page 1 was aesthetics, and we said as defined in the bylaw. And I went back to the bylaw and we don't define it in the bylaw. I think it was originally defined there and it was pulled out, and the version that was voted on by town meeting does not have it in the bylaw. And what I also noticed was in our early discussions, we moved things out of the bylaw that were more specific. We tried to make the bylaw as generic and cursory as a framework document. And aesthetics, which is a controversial concept to begin with, was it so vague, was just lost in the shuffle. Now, we can not define aesthetics, which I think is a little bit dangerous, or we can define it. And I went back into my notes and I sent you a copy late today in which I recrafted a definition of aesthetics to say, shall mean the visual appearance, appropriateness, or intrinsic quality of an activity as it relates to the site setting, parenthetically landscape, seascape, and or geography, comma, scaling to the setting, and visual lineage for public with scenic vistas over wetlands and water resources.
All right, the only concern I had, and I'm not sure my concern is valid now that you've read it, but my concern when I read it on the email was that it said about use, and I think it should be use or structures, because it's kind of hard to have a visual on a use that it really is more likely the structure that's going to cause the problem visually and to be in harmony with. So I'm just using an example, which could be a crazy.
I used the term activity, which we define in the bylaw as being structures, uses.
I didn't know that when I looked at it.
I specifically used the word activity.
So it should be a capitalized A then, so that it's clear that the definition.
We could do that. We can
Yeah,
do
then
that.
it should be clear it's a definition. I didn't realize that when I was looking at it, so I'm fine with that as we've defined it. Or we could even say, activity with a capital A is defined in the bylaw, and leave it at that. I just want to make sure people know that's just not a word, it's a definition.
Well, I think that what I tried to do was, people talk about aesthetics like I have a view, I don't want to see a dock, in my view. Well, okay, that may be a personal thing, but if you're on a shoreline, docks can be part of that setting. I mean, that's what, so just
Well,
because.
I'm okay with the definition, I just didn't know it was one.
Yeah.
And so if we're clear in our regulations that when we use the word, activity, it's not a word, it's a
Yeah.
definition.
Yeah.
That has many words to it,
Okay,
and that's fine.
okay, so I will say as defined in bylaw.
I
Okay.
think I'm fine then with that. It clears up the one problem I had when I saw it.
Yep. On page 2, we have this term that does not appear anywhere, but we've defined it, called building upon.
Hmm.
The definition that we have means construction of any kind or earthwork, whether on land or in water, placing of obstructions or objects in water other than boats, moorings, fish, or shellfish traps, and aids to navigation. I don't know if we need that definition. The term does not occur anywhere, and typically definitions are designed to, clarify words that are used in the regulations.
Well, yeah, I agree with you there. If that's the only place you use it, then I'm not so sure maybe the word build upon shouldn't be there. It should be everything else you said afterwards. Because normally when we do a definition, it's because we want consistency throughout a document. And rather than put a big long phrase in all the time, we condense it to 1 or 2 words. In this, if it's the only time it appears, there's no point in build upon, I think, is a little too vague. So I think you need the rest of it.
This is actually
I
one
think
of,
the rest of it is
Go ahead,
included
Nate.
activity,
Okay.
the activity definition in the bylaw.
yeah, so I was looking at my notes here, and that was actually one of the definitions I had a question on, and I agree. I would have thought activity covers that,
Yeah.
and therefore it's not
Do it.
needed.
Let's do it. That's a great.
That's fine. It's in blue because I didn't like it necessarily, but whatever.
Well, I think this is a better solution. We've
Yeah.
already defined things, and let's use the same definition.
Yeah, I was thinking the same exact thing. The activity covers that.
Yep.
I didn't even think of that, so you guys are smarter than me.
Okay. On page 3, we define determination here, which we also define in the bylaw. So I've just deleted it out. Determination is a procedural matter. It's defined in the bylaw.
Agreed.
I put on page 4, I put public water supply in blue. And thinking about that, we do protect public water supply as a value, so I'm inclined to leave it in, but it just I don't know, I just, at the time, it caught my attention.
Well, I mean, let's just think about that for a second, and I'm not gonna belabor it, but if we have things that are already covered in the bylaw, to cover them again in the, you know, the rules is an opportunity for ambiguity to be created.
But this is not defined in the bylaw. It's
Okay.
mentioned in the bylaw and wetland values.
Okay, so that's fine, as long as we don't
Okay,
then put it there, but I'm just saying, whenever we have things covered by the bylaws, we really shouldn't be putting them back in the regulations unless we're quoting verbatim.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, we're just injecting ambiguity.
okay, now this is a little scientific, but I think it's worth discussing. At the bottom of page 4, we talk about vernal pools or vernal pool habitat. And I won't read the entire definition, but we included in the existing definition in the regulations a phrase which is free of adult populations or are areas that vernal pool species, amphibians, and arthropods use for breeding. Okay? Then, immediately following that, we define vernal pool species, which include wood frogs, green frogs, mole salamanders, four-toed salamanders, Fowler's toad, American toad, spring peepers, and gray tree frogs. There isn't an arthropod in that list. And those are the species that the bylaw defines as vernal pool species. So my question is, I have no trouble with the species listed. The state includes arthropods. The bylaw has never included arthropods. So what I'm thinking of is in the previous definition, just striking the parenthetical phrase amphibians and arthropods.
All right, I mean, I think that makes sense. We want to be consistent.
Yeah, I mean, the two definitions are in conflict because of the use of that one term. So if you're comfortable with me striking it, I will do so.
And
am.
sorry, would you then strike the vernal pool species that are listed as well? That definition?
Again,
Would you then strike the vernal pool species definition as well?
I leave that in place. The vernal pool species list is fine, as far as I'm concerned. My issue was, in that list, there are no arthropods, yet in vernal pools, we talk about protecting amphibians and arthropods.
I only wonder, why can't we just leave it at vernal pool species and not define vernal pool species, or do we have to define
Or
it?
just put vernal pool
I
species.
think we have
No,
to,
you have to.
they're different than what the state has.
Okay,
I don't know why, but they are. That's just the way it is.
just feels limiting. I mean, maybe it's all encompassing, but my only concern is there's some other species that's not listed there that
Well,
might be.
I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example. The state protects fairy shrimp as a vernal pool species. The bylaw doesn't. Fairy shrimp are arthropods.
Yeah,
If
Okay.
we added fairy shrimp in there, which might be an appropriate way, we could leave amphibians and arthropods in the previous definition. But we do not, in our list right now, we do not have arthropods.
okay.
So, to me, from a scientific perspective, it's a contradiction. If we want to add fairy shrimp, we can. If we, the state list also includes certain insect species, which are arthropods. I'm throwing this out to you because I mean, I can go either way. I mean, frankly, I think the state list is a better list. I don't know why this list was so limiting, but it is what it is.
Mike and Richard, you would know legally better than me, but if we do strike amphibians and arthropods, does that, obviously it doesn't limit state jurisdiction or what the state law is, but would that be any kind of limiting on us by
Well,
just
only
sticking
as
to
to our
that vernal,
bylaw,
vernal
Carl.
pool
Only
species.
as to our bylaw. So if we were going to try and enforce our bylaw on a project because of vernal pool, and it didn't have any arthropods, but that's the reason we would have no legitimate grounds for doing so under our bylaw. It would have to be under the state regs.
Right.
So I'm kind of in agreement with Mark, though, that if we're going to have a list, why don't we just put the state's list in there?
I agree.
That's what I think too.
I would just reference the state list and then it's not, then you're not being ambiguous here, you know.
No, no,
well-
also it would stop all confusion, Mark, if you do that. The
Yeah.
consistency versus confusion, I think I'd err on consistency to prevent problems down the line.
I agree. I'm fine with that. Okay, so what I will do is I will craft the definition of vernal pool species. And I will send that off to you guys. Okay, and I will make that definition consistent with the state list. Okay.
I'm in agreement with that.
What I will do is, because the state list is so much longer, I could turn this short 4-line paragraph into 10, 15 lines. Instead of doing that, what I will probably do is, for your purposes, I'll scan copies of the list that the state has, but I will reference the state list as presented in whatever regulation it is in.
I think that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
I think that's the right way to do it, because the state may end up amending that list, and we want us to be consistent.
Right. And it would be the current state list, because the state list could change.
Right.
Okay. I'm just thumbing through pages to see if there's any more blue text here. I've gone from page 5 to I'm up to page 12 now, so, and there's nothing.
There was blue text in the submittal requirements,
Okay.
which is I think on page 11 or sorry 12.
We'll go back. Let me just finish up. I'm
Yeah.
heading towards the back of this. I'll go back to page 12, see what was there. Page 12.
Oh, under the stormwater,
Uh,
just under stormwater management guidelines, so citation in blue, Mark.
Stormwater management. Okay, so I'm on page 10. And I'm at stormwater management. Oh, wait, okay, I see what you're saying. I've got to get that citation, it's in the town, I have to get that citation from DPW. I don't know where they've codified that, that's a note for me. That's what that is. Nice, good pickup, I went right by that one. But that's just where the regs and the policy is. Okay, that's already published, that's not negotiable, you know. All right, so I will clean this up and I will get you copies of this and I will highlight whatever we changed so that you can see it and see if you guys are comfortable with it.
Mark, the only other comment I had, and maybe I'll just cover it now instead of sending it to you, is in the definition of date of receipt. I think you added 2 sentences at the end that state, please note that when an application is deemed complete, that refers to it being administratively complete. That does not necessarily mean it's technically complete. The latter requires a more comprehensive review. And that may be clear to everybody, but it wasn't clear to me, and I just wanted to clarify that piece.
What page was that on? I do remember
It's on page 3 of the version I'm looking at, or at least
okay, let me go back to that.
in the definition of date of receipt.
Data, okay, data receipt, okay. Means
Yeah,
that
last
the data,
sentence.
the conservation of home or usual place of application is not deemed submitted if it does not comply with the procedure section of the as available online and through the town's upon determination by the Conservation Commission or its agent that the application is complete and in compliance with the submission requirements of these regulations, commissioners shall stamp it received. Please note that when the application is deemed complete following the step on the portal, that first to be. Yeah, there are 2 reviews that take place on every file. The first review comes very, very early. It's the first step. It even it doesn't even allow fees to be paid. Because we look at an application and if it doesn't have the minimal tenets of completeness, we don't approve it. Okay, once we approve it, we've only approved it because it has all of the required pieces. The pieces that are there could be wrong. They could be technically inaccurate, but they have provided an argument. And then that gives us the opportunity to get the fees paid, and then it gives staff the time to sit down, roll out the plans, roll out the narratives, and read and see what they're saying and what they're trying to accomplish. And at that point, we then have the ability to respond to the applicant through the portal. And many times I respond through the portal, and I also email the applicants or their agents indicating that the plan, your narrative says you're going to do X, but the plan doesn't say that. And at the end of the day, the plan has to say it because the plan is what's going to be in the field, not the narrative. They're not going to have a big book with the application in it. They're going to have a sheet, a plan, and everything that's in that narrative has to be on that plan. That's part of the technical review. You also might get a situation where somebody may be proposing a type of piling for a dock, which may not be the preferred environmental solution. Okay, they're using greenwood now, they're not using pressure treated as an example. They may say pressure treated piles. Well, no, that's not going to be allowed. Rethink that. Okay, that's part of the technical review. I can't get to that detail of reviewing of a plan or a narrative without first knowing that the application is fundamentally complete in its components. That's what that's trying to say.
I understood that, and frankly, to your point, Nat, I think what they're trying to accomplish is to say to the world, your application isn't received until it's complete, and it'll be checked to determine completedness. Once it's stamped as complete, that's the date of receipt, because that starts the time clock running for us as a commission to have to take some action.
Right.
And so if you throw in a piece of crap that isn't even remotely, forget about the technical, but procedurally complete, we don't want them to say, well, the time clock started 2 weeks ago. Even though
we had a situation a couple of years ago. We had a filing by an engineer that we all know and who I respect, and they got the property information wrong. They were saying that a project was on a specific piece of property and it wasn't. And we've had discussions with some people since then about that very issue.
Yep.
Because they didn't do their job. Now, they filed an application and the application was administratively complete. They filed a Form 3, it was fully filled out, blah, 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 blah. When I sat down and looked at it, I said, wait a minute, this doesn't work. This facility, this activity is taking place on somebody else's land, and yeah, that's somebody else has signed off on it, so we can approve or disapprove it. But the application is wrong. So we interceded and they took us to they took it to DEP as for a superseding order. And I was standing in the rain with the engineer and DEP and they said, what do you have to say? I said, the application is wrong. Okay, I did the deed research. This is the deed research. And the guy from DEP looked at the engineer and said, unless you have deed information that disproves this is the correct citations, not what you have. So, I mean, but that takes time and to get a complete application and hold it up because I'm doing a technical review at the front end is really not fair because A, it doesn't free up the fee payment to justify the investment that staff is putting in to review it, and then B, if it's technically incorrect or technically incomplete, we can say as a recommendation, I'm not ready to recommend approval or disapproval because this information is missing. And we typically continue those. So I mean, that's what. I mean,
Okay.
that's
Yeah,
what
I'm fine with it then. I was just,
I don't know if maybe it can be said clearer. I'll look at it. But that's in essence the process that we go through on every application.
yeah, that makes sense. Okay, that's helpful. One other thing I just noticed as we were talking, I know we said we want to get rid of the definition of building upon.
Yeah.
I do see, at least in my version, maybe it's been removed subsequently, but in the definition of conditions, just a few definitions below that, I do see the term builds upon used.
Oh, I have it in blue, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I just saw that.
Yeah.
So I think our original thought still stands, but I just want to call it out.
Okay, well, I can strike builds upon.
Yeah.
I mean, removes, fills, dredges, or alters covers it.
Yeah.
You build upon, it builds upon is just another phrasing in there.
Okay, that covers everything I had, Mark, so we can.
Okay, that's fine. So are we good for me to finalize this one more time?
I think
Yep.
I am, from my perspective, yes.
Yep.
Okay. So let's see, that brings us to enforcement. And I'll try to make this as painless as possible, although it's not. 709 Russell's Mills Road. They were to have filed a after the fact notice of intent to us by a deadline date of June 27th. That did not happen. We contacted their consultant. Their consultant said they were going to look into it. The consultant is Brandon Faniff, who we all know and respect. It was one of his junior staffers. And basically, Brandon got back to me today indicating that the reason the application has not been filed and it's ready to go is that the applicants, the violators, the Raposos, have refused to pay the filing fees. I'm basically getting a little fed up with having to deal with these issues, people saying the fees are unfair, we didn't know. Yeah, we get those excuses all the time. I'm ready to recommend to the commission to authorize me to request sending this to town council. I don't have time to chase these people down. I really don't.
I'll entertain a motion to send this matter regarding 709 Russell's Mills Road to town council for enforcement.
So moved.
Second.
Second,
All in favor, roll call vote. Richard,
yes.
Kyle,
Yes.
Nat,
Yes.
my vote rather is a yes, so that passes unanimously.
Okay, second item is 15 Delano Street. This was another, we went in, we did the work, we didn't get any permits, we didn't know, blah, 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 blah. It was also due for filing on June 27th. They failed to do that. We did contact them. We sent them a letter. Their engineer did call us yesterday or today, indicating that they were in the process of putting together the notice of intent. They asked about some procedural matters. The engineers from Taunton and unfamiliar with Dartmouth policy. Jenna is handling that. At this point, I would suggest that we give them until the, to get something to us, for the, I would say the July 23rd meeting, but that agenda is already chock full, with numerous continuances sloughing off.
Mark, I would suggest that we do the following. We ask that they have a completed application or a completed NOI in by the 23rd. Then they can get heard the following meeting.
Okay, that makes sense.
With the appropriate communication to them, Mark,
Say that again, Richard?
with the appropriate written communication to them
Yep,
as what we've on what we have discussed tonight.
yep, I will pass that on. And actually, what I would suggest is, instead of the 23rd, which is the night of our hearing, why don't we make them, do it,
By
what-
Thursday noon following?
Tuesday,
middle day.
Thursday submittal deadline, whatever, I don't
Yeah,
know.
I'm okay with that. I just figured, I want them to have, if they've got their NOI filing complete, okay,
So
by our deadline
I
for
would
that.
change that date to July, 18th,
All right,
which is a week from Thursday. I'm good with that.
okay.
Is it, do you want to take a vote on that, or do you want to just?
No, I don't think we need a vote. I think that's,
Fair enough. Okay, and then there's 51 R Slade Street, and this is, in my opinion, going to be a nightmare. And I'll try to give you the short version of the story, although I don't know that there is a short version. We were asked to look at a piece of property, a separate, unrelated piece of property for potential A&R creation. And in doing so, DPW was first to uncover this work that appears to have been done without any permits from anybody, does not appear on any assessor's record, and the property is designated as residential non-developable. There are two structures, one of which exists on, and this is a separate property than the A&R property. The A&R property was only the impetus of finding this out. There's a building on one of the lots. And then there is a second building associated with that first building that is built square in the middle of a paper street, to which I have not uncovered any deeded property rights of that paper street to the owner of the lot in question. The paper street divides two lots, 165-59 and 165-43. Both of those lots are owned by the same owner. The 165-43 lot has a rather large house on it, and also a large enclosed built-in pool and accessory structure, which was properly permitted by, I don't know if they really should have allowed this, but the commission at the time, this was back in 2001, I think, voted in favor of the project. They issued an order of conditions, and a certificate of compliance was issued. I have no question with that. I don't know that I would have recommended that. I think it's a little much for the site, but it was approved, and so on and so forth. In that filing, there was a wetland line on the plan that bisected the paper street, and everything north of that line was wetlands, in which both of these structures that are not of record have no permits whatsoever, whether from building, whether from conservation, whether from Board of Health, whether from zoning or DPW, whatever the case may be, this is backland, nobody ever noticed it, and you would have to go back there to find it. And nobody did. I mean, I went out to the site today to do a peripheral. You can't even see it from any of the surrounding streets. This is like hidden in a thicket of vegetation. So we clearly have a wetland violation, but there are other violations that in other disciplines that are that are clear. And we're finding more and more of this in town. You know, somebody will say, hey, we have a stormwater issue, and oh, by the way, we think they're in wetlands. So it becomes a DPW conservation issue. Or, hey, they built a building, we have no stormwater approvals, it's in wetlands, and oh, by the way, it's in a paper street, which becomes a zoning issue. So I've approached the town, specifically the third floor, and said, guys, how do you want to deal with this? Do you want individual departments sniping at this individual? Or does the town want to take a position like you are woefully in violation of numerous town rules? Bing, 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 bing. And, you know, we need to develop a way of correcting these. Now,
Ask a question though. We're
Sure.
only a conservation commission. So if we're gonna tie anything we do to everyone else, then I don't think we're doing our job.
I'm not doing that. I'm suggesting that multiple departments have identified this problem because of this A&R review that we did.
Yeah,
And so we can go after this individual just on our own, and I'm totally willing to do that. But I think as a service to the town fathers need to be aware, because they may want to have a greater strategy that's a town overall approach that allows each department within that overall strategy to do their job.
well, except that in my view, I'm speaking now from Mike Kehoe, not necessarily on behalf of the rest of the commissioners. If that town strategy ends up with 3 or 4 years of litigation, because they're talking about whether or not the derelict fee statute is implicated here, and the fellow actually does have the right to put his structures in the paper street, which was never constructed, and all those other things. And it's going to end up in land court or some other place regarding that. Meanwhile, the wetlands issues don't get corrected.
Well, I
Really
understand.
want- I mean, if that's the case, that means anytime we decide we want to have something done from a wetlands protection standpoint, whether it's to enforce the state regs or to enforce the bylaw, we got to check with everybody in town to see if they want to add on anything too. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it seems to me that we should stick within our lane and to try to be the governing body of the town on all developments and all problems. I think we start going beyond our jurisdiction. That's me.
Mike,
personally.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. Would you think it feasible or wise? We pursue on the conservation matter, the conservation issues, and just give a notice to all other parties?
I would say the following. Yeah, I'm in agreement with that. I'm thinking our job should be to issue the notice of violation, notify and copy all the other departments. And then I suspect when it comes time to ask for town council to get involved, then the town's going to decide if they're going to allow town council to just go in on conservation or to act on behalf of all the other departments who should have chimed in when they saw our notice. Okay, and then the town will make that decision, but I don't want us to wait for everybody. Okay, because we have a violation of the Wetlands Protection Act. We have a violation of the town bylaw. I don't want to
Okay.
sit on our ass while we're waiting for the other town departments to get.
But
And we have perfectly covered ourselves where that's concerned, and to prevent the other aspects of the town, the other entities,
We're not
literally
foreclosing.
crawling down our throat and say, why didn't you give us the courtesy of telling us what was going on?
Hey, we first of all, to that point, if we're gonna do this coordinated effort, we still have to do the notice of violation as a conservation commission. It doesn't come from the select board. You
No,
violated, you know,
I agree with that, but there are a couple things here. Early on in your description, Mike, you said this is gonna be in court. This is gonna be in court whether we go by ourselves or the town goes after
but
this.
I mean, if we know there's a violation, Mark, we can't wait for the other town departments to figure out what their,
This violation has been in place for 20 years.
well, it could be in place for 30 years. I don't know of any issues that would preclude the enforcement of the Wetlands Protection Act.
I'm not suggesting that we don't enforce the Wetlands Protection Act, but this is becoming a problem. 709 Russell's Mills Road, the one we just voted to send to town council. This is a multi-disciplinary, multi-departmental problem. We're seeing, we've got somebody on McCabe Street operating a commercial business. We've noticed them, they've ignored us, they've ignored zoning. I mean, these problems are becoming larger than a two-person office can handle. Okay, and so my view is, while I'm not giving up our jurisdiction, I think that, and I have no problem with going in and copying everybody, but that's fine with me. You know, and I appreciate the comments. I'm looking for guidance from you people. But there's a bigger picture, you know, that happens within 400 Slocum Road. Where we're getting violations left, right, up and down by multiple offices. And a lot of offices don't know stuff is happening. So it's just, I'm just concerned about that from a global perspective, you know.
Well, I guess the question is, do you want to expand our jurisdiction to be the watchdog for the other departments too? And I personally don't. I think we got enough work on conservation.
Department. That's my opinion. I mean, if I see something that I know is a Board of Health problem, or I think is a Board of Health problem, I go to Chris. I say, hey, Chris, this is what I came up with. You know, you want to run with it?
I don't have a problem with as an, oh, by the way, while we're doing our job, you see it, say, hey, while I was out there, you might want to go take a look. I think you might have an issue for Board of Health, or talk to Randy and say, hey, Randy, when I was out there, I noticed structures and I don't think there's any building permits for them. I don't have a problem with that, but I don't know that we want to say, let's just get this big group of departments together and let's coordinate and figure out how we're gonna.
Nothing will get done.
on
Nothing.
us.
Nothing will get
and-
done timely.
That and other departments, you know, not to say it would happen, but you don't want to see other departments, you know, try and take priority over wetlands when,
Yeah.
or, you know, you just don't. We should just issue our enforcement and that be the end of it. And if they want to send it to town council in the end, send it to town council.
I mean, because if you think about where they may go, when you have these multiple jurisdictional issues, right? Things that we do, if it goes to court, usually ends up in Superior Court. And I'm now just going to speak from the town standpoint. It's cheaper for the town to be in the Bristol County Superior Court than to send Brian or Anthony to Boston to be in the land court. Because every time they do that, it's half a day's minimal, half a day's charge. Because they're going to have to go to Boston, sit around, wait, get heard on a motion, drive all the way back to Dartmouth, and the town's going to get charged for 6 hours or 7 hours. Do the same thing in Bristol County, it's an hour, hour and a half. And just because those matters can go to land court. Ours, land court doesn't really. It could, but that's not the right place for it. The land court is not where you usually get issues regarding Wetlands Protection Act. But you do regarding zoning, you do regarding planning. You don't get Board of Health usually in the land court either. So I think to mix everything all up is going to have those commissions and boards, which can go locally to the Superior Court, have them defer and delay and cost more money ultimately. But so I think stay within our guidelines, stay within our jurisdiction. You see something, tell the other guys, hey, you might want to go out and take a look. I think there's a problem. let them go out and look on their department or board's behalf, determine if there is or there isn't. And if there is, then they have to do what they do. And if the town wants to coordinate litigation, I think that's the prerogative of the select board. They can engage town council as they see fit.
I
But
agree wholeheartedly, Mike, wholeheartedly.
I mean, for what it's worth.
What's your call? I do what you want me to do.
Yeah, I think we just go, I would issue the letter and I would notice every other one of the departments. And I would also, if you want to, you can send a parenthetical letter that says, hey, guys, I think you've got these violations out there. You might want to check into it. And if they don't take action timely, so be it. I mean, we can't control their, and I know Randy's very new to the job and probably still coming to grips with problems that he didn't know existed. I know Chris is we're all busy, but if we start to try and do everything as one unit, there was no point in us having separate units. You could just have one official board for the town that takes care of everything. One-stop shopping. We don't, and there's a reason we don't.
Okay. I'm done.
I am too. So at this juncture, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Roll call vote. Richard,
Yes.
Kyle,
yes.
Yes.
my vote is yes. Meeting adjourned. Gentlemen.
Good night,
thank you.
everyone.
Very-
Night, guys.
Good night.